comment, bienvenue. Welcome once again to another live stream. The sharper-eyed amongst you will notice that in the virtual studio, over the other side of the pond to me, is Stephanie Mitchell Hughes, a lady who runs, basically the heads up, this channel. It's Resilience 2.0. It's a journey of having gone through some hard places, learned some hard lessons, comes at the other side. We are in the midst of a maelstrom of changes going on in America, and I'm trying not to characterize it. We are a non-political show. We talk about really the results of things rather than why they happen or whose fault it is. It's about what's going on and how do we deal with it. And this today's topic is no different from that. It's the difficulty of having hard conversations. Now, I'm not going to say what I think you mean by that. Stephanie, what do you mean by that? What's the difficulty in having hard conversations?
So, and I'm just going to, on this one, I've just got to speak. I'm going to speak based upon my own personal experience and based upon my own, thoughts and everything.
So this is about feelings and reactions and the way you perceive the world. This is
So I'm just going to give my own personal experience.
Okay.
So I'm going to start as I do with things. I start by putting myself on blast. And when I say I put myself on blast, that means I'm going to talk about something that I did that brought this issue directly in my face.
Okay.
And so I'm going to try to make this really a short, explanation.
But this will give us context.
Yeah, I'm trying to give some context. So if you follow, I live in the United States, so I can't help but be, I don't know.
Well, you're in the eye of the storm.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it, so I can't help but keep an eye on what's going on. I can say that I watch a lot of Call the Midwife. I just have to,
That's her British connection there.
Yeah, I watch a lot of Call the Midwife. I'm on Netflix a lot, and so I just try to keep myself my powder dry, so to speak. Because I am a person, if you haven't figured that out already, I have very strong opinions. And I'm strong. I don't know if I have strong opinions, but I'm really strong-willed. So earlier this week,
and may I say, you've got a very strong sense of what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, I would like to think.
And justice is important to you.
Yeah, justice is incredibly important to me. That's the reason. I mean, I represented kids. I had a magistrate tell me one time, a magistrate judge tell me, he goes, you're scrappy. And it's true. I am. I'm scrappy. I have a very strong sense of justice, and I don't like to see vulnerable people exploited, picked upon, or harmed in some way. So there's been a lot of conversation over in the United States about amongst Black women. I can't say this is all Black women, but I can say within some of the circles that I have found myself in, right, about the 92%, meaning the 92% of Black women who voted for Kamala Harris. And so there have been these town hall meetings going on across the United States where
I've been watching of them, and whenever anybody asks any hard questions, the people skedaddle.
Well, yeah, and it's been rumored again. It's alleged, I say allegedly, reportedly, because I didn't actually hear this out of someone's mouth, that some people have been told to stop having town hall meetings.
I've read that too.
But that's got to be on them. So there was a town hall meeting that was in Idaho, way out west from where I am. And I don't like terms liberal, conservative. I don't like those terms of people, because I just think that no one is one way or another. For example, one of the things in a former life, I used to be a hearing officer. I was an administrative hearing officer. And because of my sense of justice and not wanting to see vulnerable people taken advantage of, you would think, oh, she really is going to be expansive, lenient, et cetera, et cetera. And I tended to be one of the most conservative ruling hearing officers around amongst all of my colleagues. I was one of the most conservative. So I don't think that, people are all one way or another. I just think people are people. But in any event, there was for purposes of this, I am going to use the word conservative. So there was a woman who was in the audience. She was a physician, and it was a more conservative crowd. And this woman was talking about how women were dying, meaning in terms of healthcare decisions. The crowd shouted her down. Security was summoned, and she was forcibly pulled, removed from the audience. And of course, the women who were in the audience, and it was an all-white audience. And so many of the women who were in the audience, as observed by the video that subsequently went viral, recorded it, they clapped, they laughed, they jeered. But not one person got up to help her. And so in the days after this, there were a number of Black women who took to the airwaves, and I saw this mainly on TikTok, who said, this is for white women. This incident involving this particular white woman who was drug out of this town hall meeting is an example of why we cannot work with you. And we cannot work with you. Black meaning Black women cannot work with you. And the reason that they were saying this is because not one person stood up to help. But if another Black woman was in the audience and they saw that happening, whether the woman was white or Black, but especially if the woman was Black women would not have necessarily kept their seats. They certainly would not have been jeering, clapping, or anything else, or recording it, but they would have gotten up and proceeded to begin helping that person. And if somebody was, if there were going to be arrests, then I guess all of us would have been arrested, because I'm not going to keep my seat while another Black woman is being harmed in some way.
I'm going to ask you a hard question then.
Uh-huh.
If you'd been in that audience and saw this white woman being manhandled, literally and metaphorically, would you have stood up?
Yeah. And so the thing about that, up until that point, I had seen the incident, but I hadn't really considered what the Black women who I saw, whose videos I saw, and I saw several over the course of the days that followed. When I saw those, I just thought, you know what? Yeah, that's exactly. Because along with that, and I guess this is the algorithm, I don't know what else to attribute it to. There was a video that came up, and it was a video of a 13-year-old little Black girl, and she was there with a few of her friends. And the police detained this little 13-year-old girl, had her in handcuffs, ready to put her in the back of a police car, because they claimed that she fit the description of a person who had committed some sort of robbery. And the other little Black girls who were there were like, well, wait a minute. That's not true. That's not the type of person who she is. And so the little girl is just crying and just completely traumatized by the entire thing. And so eventually,
13-year-old. A 13-year-old.
Oh, I've seen younger, Gareth. But And so what ultimately wound up happening was there was a lot of back and forth, and the police officer was there with his partner. And they eventually get over to the police car, and they see the other little girls who were there with her saw a picture. And so of the proposed suspect, because I think it maybe had been online or it was somewhere. And so the little girls are looking at this picture, and they were like, because the main thing that the officer was hanging his hat on were her shoes, the shoes that she was wearing. And the little girls who were looking at it, they looked at the picture and they were like, wait a minute. In this picture, this person who you're saying committed this crime has on all white shoes. Her shoes are not all white. They are pink and white. So how can you say that she committed this crime and their shoes are different based upon their shoes, and they're wearing different shoes? And the police officer wound up letting that little girl go. Now, I have no doubt that she is still traumatized to this day. And I don't know what happened.
Absolutely.
In the aftermath. I don't know if her parents went down and talked to the officers. I don't really know what happened. I know that she was released. So then we fast forward to one of the larger conversations that's been happening. We have all these DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that seem to be rolled back in the wake of these executive orders. Now,
aren't they being dispersed with? Aren't they being got rid of?
But we've had this conversation before,
yes.
And I keep having to say this: executive orders are not laws. They are not the law.
But people are treating these bloody executive orders as if they are.
And again, they should not be doing that, because in doing that, they are abdicating their constitutional responsibility.
And I get that too, but Stephanie,
we have branches of government. So and again, this is what's going on. And constitutionally, it is incorrect. But I digress, because that's not the point of this conversation.
I'm sorry.
So people have been rolling all these DEI. There's one at Ohio State University, a gentleman who is now deceased. His name is Dr. Frank Hale. Began to establish spaces around campus, programs around campus, so that not just Black students, but students who were from diverse backgrounds could have spaces where they could go and where certain cultures could be celebrated. You didn't have to be a member of that race, that culture, etc., to participate. It was just a space.
Right.
That space was established in 1970. This week, that all of that programming, all of those things were rolled back. And Ohio State is a small city. They have, their main campus has in excess of 50,000 people on it. So, which I find that to be most disheartening. But we have the words, the letters DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have now somehow become conflated with terms like affirmative action, which no longer exists, which diversity, equity, inclusion is not affirmative action. But again, I digress. This is how it's been painted. And so we have people who are trafficking in that type of messaging, because diversity, equity, and inclusion includes everything from women, to veterans, to people who have disabilities,
right,
to people of certain colors. I mean, it's
the whole gamut,
whole range of things. And all it says is not, I'm going to get this job or I'm going to have this opportunity just because. No, all it says is we're going to try to have spaces that are diverse so that we can bring different voices to the table, because different voices give us ideas to make that may make something better that other people, if you have all the same people, you have not thought about.
Right.
So, this is where we are. And so today, and this is where I put myself on blast. Today I was at a meeting, and it's a program committee meeting for an organization within Columbus that presents forums on a wide range of ideas.
Okay.
And so a suggestion from the program committee, one of the members of the program committee was to have a forum about DEI as part of the recognition or the remembrance of George Floyd, the death of George Floyd. Because a lot of corporations like Target, like Walmart, like I don't know about Amazon, but different and employers and what have you, they rolled out all these DEI programs. Got a person, you have people who are handling diversity, equity, and inclusion for our organization.
Gotcha.
And they ran out and did that in the wake of George Floyd's murder. So now these things are being rolled back. And part of the whole thing with the DE&I is this belief by some people that African Americans are somehow the greatest beneficiaries of diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's farthest from the truth. The biggest beneficiaries of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, just like with affirmative action, are white women. And Black people.
Same thing happened over here, by the way, but same thing happened. Yeah.
And so then Black people, including Black women, are the last people who benefit from DEI programming after even immigrants. We are at the very, very bottom of any group that falls under the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so one of the things that I said to the people who were at the program committee, and I hope that they did not take it as really harsh, but I said, we can't have a conversation in a mixed group. I just don't think that we can have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, not have a transparent, honest conversation about that. We cannot do it. I don't think we can do it where there are white people and Black people talking about these types of topics, whether it's race, whether it's immigration, whether it's reproductive rights. We cannot have conversations about this in mixed spaces.
No, it's very hard because it's inflammatory.
Right. I mean, yeah, people, it's like, are we going to really be able to do this without people becoming upset and behaving defensively? Because talking about race, talking about caste, talking about differences, and really talking about with honesty and valuing the experiences, the firsthand lived experiences of other people who are navigating these spaces and navigating that history is hard. And the thing is that if it is hard for you to talk about it, nobody is suggesting that people feel guilty about what their ancestors did during slavery or any of that kind of thing. But if it is hard for you to talk about it, if you find yourself becoming defensive when people talk about slavery and the horrors of slavery, imagine what it is like to actually live the reality of the horrors of slavery. Because
It's unthinkable.
well, it's like I didn't. I mean, I got here after slavery, and well, when slavery ended. After I'm kind of coming on, and we're coming on the scene in the midst of this,
Right.
but the the experience is embedded in my DNA. And it's because it's trauma. And we've never really had an opportunity to grieve and to have trauma and to even have the country where we live, where our ancestors were brought to against our will, to even have a conversation or a recognition by that country of how hard it is. And it's not really about being a victim, because I don't feel or look at myself as a victim. I don't believe in sugarcoating what happened, because the way you cannot heal, and I have said this over and over again, you cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. So you can rewrite the history of slavery if you want to, but those wounds and the things that go along with that will never ever heal until you, who have chosen to rewrite it, heal whatever it is that is driving you to think the way that you do about, in this instance, African Americans, in this instance, African American slavery. And it, as it's been said over and over again, as we're in this period with all these things that are happening, I believe at this point, what's happening now is not my lesson to learn. It is someone else's lesson to learn. Because see, I grew up with a grandparent. One grandparent was from Puerto Rico, came to mainland United States sometime in the early 1920s, born in 1907. Okay, so I have that. I have a grandfather born in 1913 in South Alabama. And the youngest of 16 children lived on a farm. And one of the things that my grandfather used to say to me all the time is, nothing has changed. Now, this is a person who died in 2004 at the age of 87. And so he would say, nothing's changed. It just looks different, but nothing has changed. And so
So it's got a different dress on, but underneath
right,
it's the same person.
exactly. And so this from a person who's one of his older brothers, so this would have been in the 1920s at some point, was taken by the Klan, and they never saw him again. Well, at that time, there was no NAACP, there was no informal NAACP legal defense fund. The NAACP was in its infancy at that point. It had just kind of come together and started and began and growing into the organization that it is today. But it certainly at that point in time was not equipped to take on the injustices of the lynchings of Black men that occurred all over the South. Just, there was no way of, so I've oftentimes, especially as a mother, I thought about his mother, my grandfather's mother, and what it must feel like to have lost a child to someone else because of someone else's hatred, that someone else hated him because of the color of his skin, and that basically never get justice for that. The people who did it, I don't know, I don't think anyone knows. And certainly the men and women and children who were lynched specifically during that time period never got justice. But so what did she have? She had to do something in order to just basically grieve that loss.
Right.
And move forward and keep living her life and not just curl up and die. And some people would say, well, she lost one, so she had 15 others. Well, if I had 20 children, losing one, any loss is going to be.
See, as soon as anybody says that, it's completely dehumanizing,
right?
Because it's treating them like they're spares, and they're not. Every human life has its own value, right?
Right. But
and the moment you treat it otherwise, you devalue that life.
Right. And it's the same thing with the lived experience. So I just wonder, and when I said that at that committee meeting, that I don't think that we can have these hard conversations, really have a conversation, just with the first example that I gave, hard conversation with white women about their response to another white woman and how that may feel, but then also to listen to what the white women, especially those, I really would love to know what the white women who were in that room watching all of this, what they themselves thought. But then also, how do we then have a conversation about what perhaps maybe is meaningless, well-intentioned, but now meaningless diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how the rolling back of all of these things, how that feels, and what does that make a person think? And so I just, I just don't know. I don't know that we could have those hard conversations. But to go back to what I was saying before, you will not heal what you refuse to acknowledge.
Yes, you can't heal it.
No, you have to.
Unless it's by pure mistake, and it's very rare that happens.
Right, you can't.
All right. Look, I'm going to round this up today because we're about to hit the half hour. I think you need to acknowledge the fact that women are women. We've got to be color irrelevant here.
Unfortunately, that is not in the United States. It is impossible. I would like to be able to live my life without having to constantly be aware of my race, my caste, my sex when I enter a room.
The trouble is, I think women have got it a double-edged sword here, because it's both their sex and their color that seems to be the thing by which they get judged, and I think that's a damn shame.
We'll see, but you know what though? I was listening to one of my absolute favorite authors, Chimamanda Adichie. She's Nigerian, and she wrote fabulous books. She spent a lot of time in the United States. I don't know if she's still here or if she's back in Nigeria, but she has written some absolutely fabulous, thought-provoking books. And she has a new one that's out that I've got to get. But I was listening to her because she was being interviewed as part of her new book. And she said, she was talking about how in Nigeria, it's not race. Like she was never brought up having to think about race. Race became an issue and seems to only be an issue in the United States. Now, in other places, it's caste. But
no,
you know,
there is racism over here, but it's a different level.
But people are not defined in terms of, well, what is your race?
No,
you're defined in terms of location, tribe, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, but she was just talking about this whole experience of a professor. A professor came in with papers and he said, I want to start by talking about and highlighting the best paper in the room. And I want to know who wrote it. And who is this person? And so when he announced her name, Chimamanda Adichie raises her hand and he had a look of shock. She said he was shocked, as if to say, I cannot believe that a Black person wrote so beautifully, so well, that this Black person did such a good job on that. And I'm like,
it wasn't that it was a woman.
No, it was because of that. And she was just talking about her experience with race and in terms of being Nigerian and she also said it's the definition is your tribe and your religion. That's what it was, tribe and religion. So I guess to wind this up and try to put a little bit of a pin in it, I don't think that we'll ever fully, I don't know, maybe we'll actually be able to put some super glue on it and close it and move on to something else. Because to quote W.E.B. Du Bois, he said that the problem of the 20th century is the color line. Well, the problem of the 21st century, I'm sad to say, continues to be the color line. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, it is incumbent upon us, me, you, anybody else, to really reflect and do their own self-awareness inventory and say, well, if I'm racist, I need to own my own racism. If I am sexist, if I am xenophobic, if I am, I have very poor ideas, negative stereotypes about people who are autistic, neurodivergent, have poor attitudes, stereotyping people who have a mental health condition. If that is what you are saying, what's coming out of your mouth, what you are sort of steeped in, you've got to put yourself, even if you just do it by yourself, on blast, I think, and do some type of self-awareness, inventory, so that we can have hard conversations and be willing to listen to each other.
Yeah, I think I think that's where we're going to draw a line here today.
Right.
The most important thing to have those hard conversations, you first have to acknowledge. If you don't acknowledge first, how can you even start the conversation? Thank you so much, Stephanie. This is a message to all of you out there. I just hope you find your way through this. It's a hard time. I want you to hold strong. We in the UK, whatever they say, we love our American cousins, and but we feel bad for you, because I think you're now in really an existential crisis. There's stuff that's been put upon you through lies and deceit and misdirection that you never signed up to, and you think you signed up to it, but trust me, you never did. And I just want you to stay strong and get through this. And hopefully we'll all be laughing and joking in a few years' time, looking back at this
I don't know about that, Gareth, but
well, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to look back on this dark time as a learning point where we learnt more about what we need to see in the character of a person who is there to lead one, what we look for in that, and maybe not overlook certain major chasms that as just minor flaws. But anyway, without getting into that, thank you so much, Stephanie. Every day is a learning day. And to everybody out there, try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars and just get through this point, but stand up for what is right. If you're a black woman or a white woman, you see a black woman or a white woman being beat down wrongly, absolutely atrociously, stand up for what is right. My God, I sound like a rabble rouser. Until next time, have a wonderful weekend and try and look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.